Hey guys, tonight we are setting our feet onto warm desert sands that have long since cooled beneath the starlight. Imagine this. The wind blows gently through broken columns, and above you the constellations sparkle in skies so crisp you feel like you could pluck them down and play marbles with Orion's belt. You find yourself wandering through the ancient land of Egypt, where the night stretches wide and history feels more alive than your phone's endless notifications. You are about to learn how board games weren't just entertainment for these people, but keys they believe could unlock the very afterlife itself. And honestly, if you had to spend eternity somewhere, you want at least one good distraction, right? Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive 3,000 years of waiting without one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far across the world we're all connected when we settle into these quiet stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here now, in the quiet expanse of an Egyptian desert night. The pyramids rise like sleeping giants, sharp edges softened by moonlight. Their stones radiating the heat of the day, but sighing into the cool air of dusk. You step closer, feeling grains of sand crunch beneath your sandals. In the distance, a flicker of torchlight from a guard, perhaps, but mostly the landscape belongs to you and the ancient echoes. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians spent their nights actually huddled by torchlight, playing small games, or if most of that imagery comes from what we found in tombs. But what's undeniable is the sheer number of board game sets discovered across Egypt. Senet men and more, they weren't just games. They were portals, instructions, and maybe even bribes for gods on the other side. The silence presses in, so you imagine the chatter of long-ago players. Picture a family sitting on woven mats, a wooden board between them. Maybe there's a father with the weathered hands of a farmer, brushing sand away from carved squares. The mother smirks knowingly as she rolls a handful of casting sticks, landing a move just close enough to tease victory. Their children laugh, elbows bumping, eager to learn. It isn't just a pastime. It's life wrapped into squares, destiny shrunk into a grid. And of course, like all humans, they must have argued over rules. We complain when someone makes up house rules for Monopoly, but here it's literally a matter of cosmology. Did that piece mean your soul would sail safely into paradise? Or was it just a chance to skip your opponent? Scholars pore over painted boards, trying to decipher markings. Was that square a trap? A blessing? Or maybe, like us, they simply argued until someone got bored and wandered off to feed the goats. The mainstream fact is clear. Senet, the most famous Egyptian game, dates back as early as 3100 BC, making it the oldest known board game in human history. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some tomb paintings show the deceased playing Senet alone, which either means they thought it was an excellent single-player pastime, or they figured the afterlife might be a little lonely. Imagine unboxing the ultimate eternal board game only to realize it's solitaire. The desert wind tugs at your clothes as you wander further. Every now and then a stone owl hoots. Not real, of course, just your imagination filling the gaps of the vast silence. You can almost hear the scratch of ancient chisels carving not just pyramids, but little squares into limestone floors. Some of those improvised boards still exist, etched by board guards into temple steps. That's right. Even in 1400 BCE, humans were doodling games on work property when the boss wasn't looking. Some things never change. But the connection between fun and faith, that's the peculiar magic here. These weren't just distractions. They were serious business. Every roll of a stick, every move of a piece symbolized forces beyond your control. Luck, fate, the gods' will. You imagine sliding a piece across the board, feeling that subtle dread. If you land on the wrong square, maybe you'd anger a deity. Think of it as a cosmic game of snakes and ladders, except the stakes were eternal. And yes, losing could mean cosmic embarrassment in front of Ra himself. So as you sit on a warm stone, the night deepening around you, you realize that history itself is layered here. The laughter of children, the strategy of nobles, the solemnity of priests, all echo through these games. They represent a human truth. We've always craved patterns, symbols, something to do with our restless hands and minds while pondering big mysteries like death. And just like that, the sand shifts under your feet, time bends, and you see yourself not just as an observer but as a participant. A carved wooden Senet board appears before you, ivory pieces gleaming in moonlight. Do you dare roll the sticks? You know it's only pretend, but some small whisper in your mind reminds you. The Egyptians truly believed each move mirrored your soul's journey. And you? Well, you've already started playing. The board lies between your knees now. 29 little squares carved into polished wood, arranged in 3 rows of 10 with a final dangling square like an afterthought. You lean closer, tracing your fingers along the faint grooves, and suddenly the desert night around you flickers with torchlight. You're no longer alone. You're sitting in an ancient Egyptian courtyard, incense burning, the air sticky with the sweetness of lotus flowers floating in shallow bowls of water. Somewhere beyond the mud brick walls, a donkey brays, as if mocking your concentration. This is Senet, the game of passing, the game of destiny. Mainstream fact? It is the earliest documented board game in the world, played for thousands of years across Egyptian history, even appearing in the tomb of Tutankhamun. But what's fascinating is how Senet straddles 2 worlds, entertainment and religion. In the Old Kingdom, it may have been just a fun pastime. By the New Kingdom, it became a serious metaphor for the soul's journey through the afterlife. Historians still argue whether its religious meaning was there from the beginning or whether board pharaohs just spiritualized their hobbies. Either way, you can't deny how symbolic it became. Imagine how it works. 30 squares, each representing stages of existence. You move your pieces, small carved pawns of ivory or faience, depending on how your sticks fall. Yes, sticks, not dice. 4 flat sticks, each with one side painted, tossed like a lazy combination of coin flipping and rolling. The number of painted sides facing up decides your move. If you're lucky, you keep rolling. If you're not, well, think of it as an ancient version of drawing the go-to-jail card. The quirky tidbit? Some boards were elaborately painted with hieroglyphs marking safe squares, traps, or the house of rebirth. Others were plain, scratched into stone, or even drawn in dust. Archaeologists have found Senet boards carved right into temple floors, almost like graffiti. Picture an ancient guard on night duty, yawning at the stars, carving squares into the limestone with a dagger. He probably didn't expect future scholars to obsess over his doodle, like it was a Rosetta Stone of board gaming. As you roll the sticks in your mind, you watch the pieces move. Each square becomes symbolic. One is the house of happiness, another the house of waters, representing chaos, perhaps the Nile flooding unpredictably. When your pawn lands there, it's not just an unlucky turn. It's a reminder that even your soul may get stuck in cosmic turbulence. Another square is a house of 3 truths, where judgment takes place. You can almost hear the whisper of priests, "May your heart be lighter than the feather of Maat." Imagine losing a casual game of Senet, and someone casually reminding you that this means doom for your eternal soul. Talk about high-stakes game night. A light joke drifts into your mind. You can't help it. Imagine if every modern video game was tied to your eternal destiny. Miss one button in Tetris, and suddenly Osiris shows up, shaking his head. "Sorry, buddy," Afterlife denied. It's funny because we know it's absurd, but for them, it was very real. Pharaohs themselves played Senet, often shown in tomb paintings hunched over boards, lips pursed, as if plotting their afterlife with every move. Queen Nefertari, in her exquisitely decorated tomb, is immortalized sitting serenely, hand poised above a Senet board. That isn't casual decor. That's her preparing to keep playing forever. Historians still argue whether she expected to play against other souls, gods, or herself. Perhaps the afterlife was less a party and more a very long, very competitive tournament. You glance up, the stars above sharp and endless. Somewhere far across the desert sands, you imagine another group huddled around their own board. Maybe they joke about their bad rolls. Maybe they argue over whether you're allowed to swap pieces at a certain square. You feel that instant recognition. Humans have always found ways to bicker over game rules. And when the stakes were your eternal journey. Oh, those debates must have been fiery. And yet, there's something calming here, too. Each move is deliberate. each piece sliding along the board of meditation, like walking across stepping stones on a river, careful not to fall in. You realize that the Egyptians weren't just passing time, they were rehearsing death. In every piece captured, every pawn that made it to the last square, they acted out the most profound mystery of human existence. What happens when you die? The night breeze cools against your skin. You look at your own hands, pretend to slide a pawn forward, and feel that ancient connection. Thousands of years separate you from them, but the rhythm is the same. The thrill of chance, the frustration of loss, the satisfaction of winning. The Egyptians believed those emotions weren't trivial. They were echoes of cosmic balance, reminders that joy and suffering were woven into the pattern of existence. And now, in the silence, you feel it. The game board has become a miniature map of a universe. Each stick toss feels like the gods themselves weighing your chances. You laugh softly to yourself. What a strange thing to play a board game and sense eternity breathing down your neck. Yet here you are, and it feels oddly comforting, like you've been given permission to see death not as an end, but as a game you can practice, prepare for, and, if you're lucky, win. You settle deeper onto the mat, the Senet board gently fading from view as if the desert itself were rearranging the pieces. In its place, you now notice something less permanent. Lines scratched hastily across a roll of papyrus. You lean closer. Someone, probably a board scribe, has taken the margins of a tax record and turned it into a playing field. That's right, gaming didn't always require a fancy wooden box. Sometimes it lived on the scraps of everyday life. The smell of ink lingers, pungent and earthy. A reed pen lies nearby, its tip still stained dark, and beside a set of knuckle bones clatter softly. You pick one up. It's worn smooth, polished not by time but by countless throws. The bones feel warm from handling, as though someone's laughter still clings to them. That's when it hits you. Board games in ancient Egypt weren't confined to the high tombs of pharaohs. They spilled into streets, kitchens, and dusty corners where ordinary people lived and played. The mainstream fact here is that archaeological digs have uncovered evidence of simple game boards drawn directly on pottery shards, papyrus scraps, and even the backs of letters. The Egyptians weren't precious about their fun. If they had space to draw squares, they had space for a game. Scholars still argue whether some of these hasty sketches were children's amusements or whether adults truly carried them like pocket chessboards. Maybe both. After all, haven't you doodled tic-tac-toe in a notebook during a boring class? Some things never change. Quirky tidbit. A few scraps of papyrus include what look like half-finished games, abandoned mid-play. Imagine two scribes hunched over a desk, pretending to calculate grain storage while secretly moving tokens, until the supervisor coughed behind them. With no time to finish, the match stays forever frozen in ink, confusing modern historians who can't tell if the rules stopped there or if it was just workplace mischief. You lean back and listen. The courtyard hums with life. Sandals slap against stone floors. A dog barks lazily in the distance. Someone sings a tune about the flooding Nile. Within this daily chorus, the quiet rattle of dice, throwing sticks, adds its own rhythm. You imagine two players leaning close, whispering bets. Not money, but favors. If I win, you copy my tax forms tomorrow. The Egyptians might not have invented office politics, but they perfected them. Rolling those sticks, you sense both the casual and the cosmic blending again. On one hand, these were games, light distractions, ways to pass hot afternoons. On the other hand, every move carried whispers of fate. Each symbol sketched on papyrus had potential meaning. A square might represent safe passage, another chaos, another renewal. Even if you were playing to pass time, you couldn't escape the subtle reminder that all life, like a game, hinged on forces beyond your control. Historians still argue about whether papyrus game sketches were practice runs for larger boards or fully legitimate budget versions of Senet. Some believe they were teaching tools, ways for children to learn rules before graduating to real boards. Others argue they were the true heart of gaming, because ordinary Egyptians couldn't afford elaborate sets. And honestly, both explanations feel right. Kids learning to play, adults sneaking fun during work. It's all human. It's all familiar. A joke slips into your mind. Imagine, if instead of Candy Crush on your phone, you had to carry around a sheet of papyrus, trying not to let it crumple in your pocket. Sorry, boss, I'm not checking Facebook. I'm practicing my eternal soul's journey. Good luck explaining that one in a performance review. Your focus drifts back to the papyrus sheet. It crackles faintly as you shift it, fragile and ancient. But in that fragility lies a truth. Entertainment doesn't need permanence to matter. Those scribbles, temporary as they seemed, became timeless echoes. Because when you tilt your head, you realize you're not just looking at old paper. You're witnessing a snapshot of life. A worker, tired and dusty, laughing with a friend over a quick game. A child, tongue poking out in concentration, learning to move a pawn. A scribe, secretly sketching squares when he should be tallying grain. And then you feel something strange. The world around you slows. The laughter softens. The ink lines blur, and suddenly the papyrus sheet dissolves into dust on the breeze. All that remains is the rhythm of the dice rattling in your palm, bones clicking like teeth, promising another throw, another chance. You look around the courtyard, empty now, and realize what's left is not the paper or the board. It's the pattern. The Egyptians played to see life reflected, to find order in chaos. Even their hasty sketches captured that longing. And you, centuries later, are caught in the same game, chasing meaning in every square, every throw, every breath. The papyrus dissolves into sand, and when you blink again, the courtyard walls have stretched higher, gilded with hieroglyphs. You find yourself in a palace chamber, its columns painted with scenes of gods guiding the dead. The air is cooler here, scented with myrrh and the faint musk of incense curling upward toward carved lotus capitals. On the floor, laid across polished alabaster tiles, sits another Senet board, this one no-scratch papyrus, but an exquisite work of craftsmanship. You glance at the figures seated around it, nobles in crisp white linen, collars glittering with lapis and gold. And there, across the board, sits a man whose eyes carry a weight heavier than the crown upon his head. A pharaoh. He leans forward, carefully sliding a carved ivory piece across the board. Fingers deliberate, movements rehearsed. Everyone watches hushed because his game isn't just a pastime. It's a ritual of authority. Mainstream fact. Depictions of pharaohs playing Senet are abundant, found painted on tomb walls and carved into stele. Tutankhamun, Amenhotep III, and even queens like Nefertari are often shown in mid-game. Scholars believe these images weren't idle snapshots, but purposeful symbols, the ruler rehearsing their victory over chaos, ensuring their soul's safe passage into the afterlife. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs actually played often, or if these images were purely metaphorical. Perhaps both, because really, who could resist rolling the sticks once in a while, even if eternity was at stake? The quirky tidbit? Archaeologists found Senet boards buried alongside royal jewelry, miniature boats, and even jars of honey. Imagine being so powerful that when you died, people decided, yes, let's make sure he has snacks and a good board game for the road. If nothing else, it proves even kings knew boredom was the real enemy in eternity. You watch as the pharaoh rolls the casting sticks. They clatter onto the board, painted sides flashing. A scribe leans in to note the move, perhaps to record it as part of ceremony. The pharaoh moves his pawn, and the crowd exhales in unison. It's not just a move, it's a sign. Did the gods approve? Would the Nile flood kindly this year? Was Maat, the goddess of truth and order, satisfied? Every tiny shuffle of ivory across would ripple with cosmic consequence. And here's where the subtle humor creeps in. Imagine being that one courtier sitting too close. Try not to cheer too loudly when the king makes a bad roll. Or the poor servant who had to carve yet another fancy Senet board because His Majesty didn't like the design. Maybe somewhere in the afterlife there's a pile of rejected game prototypes stacked next to eternal jars of beer. The chamber hums with an almost unbearable stillness. The pharaoh leans back, contemplative, eyes narrowing. You realize that in this moment he is both king and ordinary man, caught in the same uncertainty you feel when rolling dice. No power, no army, no pyramid can sway chance. And that's what makes the game dangerous and comforting at once. It reduces kings and farmers to the same vulnerability. Historians still debate whether this was deliberate propaganda. Pharaohs presented themselves as masters of fate, showing they could win even against the gods. or whether it was genuine preparation, a rehearsal for the ultimate crossing. Either way, the image stuck. Thousands of years later, you're still watching him play, and the tension is real. Another detail catches your eye. The pawns on this royal board aren't just simple pieces. They're shaped like little animals, gazelles perhaps, or abstract forms representing spirits. Some scholars argue these figurines acted like companions, spirit guides moving with you through squares of chaos and renewal. You imagine sliding a tiny ivory gazelle across the board, praying it outruns the demons of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The torches flicker, shadows dancing across painted walls. You catch yourself staring at one panel, a scene of Osiris, judge of the dead, weighing a heart against a feather of truth. It's eerily similar to the Senet grid in front of you. You understand then why this mattered so much. The pharaoh wasn't just rolling for fun. He was practicing the exact judgment awaiting him beyond death. And then, unexpectedly, the pharaoh smiles. A small human grin. He picks up the sticks again, eager for another throw. For a moment, all the pressure of ruling, of cosmic order, of eternity fades. He's just a man enjoying the thrill of a game. That glimpse of humanity, lighter than gold, more fragile than papyrus, reminds you why we still find comfort in games today. You let the image sink in. The great ruler, cloaked in linen and lapis, hunched like any commoner, hoping his throw will land well. You feel that universal kinship. Chance humbles us all, whether we're kings, scribes, or simply dreamers drifting into sleep. The papyrus dissolves into sand, and when you blink again, the courtyard walls have stretched higher, gilded with hieroglyphs. You find yourself in a palace chamber, its columns painted with scenes of gods guiding the dead. The air is cooler here, scented with myrrh and the faint musk of incense curling upward toward carved lotus capitals. On the floor, laid across polished alabaster tiles, sits another Senet board. This one no scratch papyrus, but an exquisite work of craftsmanship. You glance at the figures seated around it, nobles in crisp white linen, collars glittering with lapis and gold. And there, across the board, sits a man whose eyes carry a weight heavier than the crown upon his head. A pharaoh. He leans forward, carefully sliding a carved ivory piece across the board. Fingers deliberate, movements rehearsed. Everyone watches hushed because his game isn't just a pastime. It's a ritual of authority. Mainstream fact. Depictions of pharaohs playing Senet are abundant, found painted on tomb walls and carved into stele. Tutankhamun, Amenhotep III, and even queens like Nefertari are often shown in mid-game. Scholars believe these images weren't idle snapshots, but purposeful symbols, the ruler rehearsing their victory over chaos, ensuring their soul's safe passage into the afterlife. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs actually played often, or if these images were purely metaphorical. Perhaps both, because really, who could resist rolling the sticks once in a while, even if eternity was at stake? The quirky tidbit? Archaeologists found Senet boards buried alongside royal jewelry, miniature boats, and even jars of honey. Imagine being so powerful that when you died, people decided, yes, let's make sure he has snacks and a good board game for the road. If nothing else, it proves even kings knew boredom was a real enemy in eternity. You watch as the pharaoh rolls the casting sticks. They clatter onto the board, painted sides flashing. A scribe leans in to note the move, perhaps to record it as part of ceremony. The pharaoh moves his pawn, and the crowd exhales in unison. It's not just a move, it's a sign. Did the gods approve? Will the Nile flood kindly this year? Was Maat, the goddess of truth and order, satisfied? Every tiny shuffle of ivory across would ripple with cosmic consequence. And here's where the subtle humor creeps in. Imagine being that one courtier sitting too close. Try not to cheer too loudly when the king makes a bad roll. Or the poor servant who had to carve yet another fancy Senet board because His Majesty didn't like the design. Maybe somewhere in the afterlife there's a pile of rejected game prototypes stacked next to eternal jars of beer. The chamber hums with an almost unbearable stillness. The pharaoh leans back, contemplative, eyes narrowing. You realize that in this moment, he is both king and ordinary man, caught in the same uncertainty you feel when rolling dice. No power, no army, no pyramid can sway chance. And that's what makes the game dangerous and comforting at once. It reduces kings and farmers to the same vulnerability. Historians still debate whether this was deliberate propaganda. Pharaohs presenting themselves as masters of fate, showing they could win even against the gods, or whether it was genuine preparation, a rehearsal for the ultimate crossing. Either way, the image stuck. Thousands of years later, you're still watching him play and the tension is real. Another detail catches your eye. The pawns on this royal board aren't just simple pieces. They're shaped like little animals, gazelles perhaps, or abstract forms representing spirits. Some scholars argue these figurines act like companions, spirit guides moving with you through squares of chaos and renewal. You imagine sliding a tiny ivory gazelle across the board, praying it outruns the demons of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The torches flicker, shadows dancing across painted walls. You catch yourself staring at one panel, a scene of Osiris, judge of the dead, weighing a heart against a feather of truth. It's eerily similar to the Senet grid in front of you. You understand then why this mattered so much. The pharaoh wasn't just rolling for fun. He was practicing the exact judgment awaiting him beyond death. And then, unexpectedly, the pharaoh smiles. A small human grin. He picks up the sticks again, eager for another throw. For a moment, all the pressure of ruling, of cosmic order, of eternity fades. He's just a man enjoying the thrill of a game. That glimpse of humanity, lighter than gold, more fragile than papyrus, reminds you why we still find comfort in games today. You let the image sink in. The great ruler, cloaked in linen and lapis, hunts like any commoner, hoping his throw will land well. You feel that universal kinship. Chance humbles us all, whether we're kings, scribes, or simply dreamers drifting into sleep. The dirt-scratched grids fade beneath your hands, and now a new shape emerges in the flickering lamplight, a coiled serpent, its scales painted green and black, spiraling inward across a wooden board. The head of the snake gapes open at one end, jaws wide, waiting. The tail curls tight at the other. You lean closer, entranced by the hypnotic spiral, and realize this isn't Senet. This is Men, the game of the serpent. The mainstream fact. Men dates back to around 3000 BC, making it nearly as old as Senet, though its popularity waned after the Old Kingdom. Boards shaped like a coiled snake, divided into squares, have been found in tombs and temples. Pieces included sets of marbles and lion-shaped figurines. Historians still argue whether the game was purely recreational or held deep religious symbolism. After all, the serpent in Egyptian mythology could be protective, destructive, or both. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists found mayhem boards without consistent markings, leading to wild theories. Some suggest the game was like ancient chutes and ladders. Others think it resembled modern snakes and ladders, while a few even argue it was more like racing marbles around a track. And since no rulebook survived, scholars are basically the world's longest-running group of frustrated players trying to guess how to play from an abandoned game box. Imagine finding a Nintendo cartridge with no controller. Good luck. You reach out and place your fingers on the serpent's carved body. It feels warm, pulsing almost as if alive. A set of small marbles, polished smooth, clinks softly in a bowl beside the board. A man kneels across from you, eyes gleaming with anticipation. He takes a lion-shaped piece, places it at the serpent's head, and gestures for you to follow. The game begins. The lions chase the marbles down the serpent's coiled body. Each move feels like a heartbeat, echoing through the spiral. You can't shake the sense that you're traveling inward, deeper, towards some hidden truth. The serpent's body narrows, and with every step, the stakes rise. Will your lion capture the marbles, or will chaos strike first? Around you, the chamber fills with soft chants. Priests sway gently, their voices humming in low tones. You realize that for them, men wasn't just a pastime. It was a ritual reenactment of the serpent's role in protecting Ra, the sun god, on his nightly journey through the underworld. Every marble sliding along the serpent's back was like a star moving across the sky. Every lion a guardian. Winning might mean more than bragging rights. It could signify that light had triumphed over darkness once again. Historians still argue whether Men was ever played casually in homes or reserved exclusively for sacred settings. Some boards are simple, others ornate, suggesting both possibilities. But the truth is slippery, like the serpent itself. Maybe like all games, it shifted meaning depending on where it was played. A priest saw cosmic order. A child saw fun. Both were right. You laugh softly as your lion leaps forward, capturing a marble. The man across from you sighs, then chuckles. Even with eternity on the line, you recognize that familiar tone, annoyance at losing, softened by camaraderie. Perhaps that's the eternal lesson, that games, whether sacred or silly, bring us together and share frustration and joy. A modern thought creeps in. Imagine explaining man at a board game cafe today. Okay, so the board is a snake, you're lions, and you chase marbles. Cue confused stares. And yet, isn't that exactly what makes it appealing? Humans have always loved absurd setups that somehow make sense once you start playing. The serpent coils tighter, and you feel drawn inward, hypnotized by the spiral. The lion pieces gleam in the lamplight, and suddenly they seem more than toys. They're companions, guardians, maybe even your own spirit guides. You realize that each move is less about winning and more about surviving the journey. And then, in one final roll, your lion reaches the serpent's tail. The crowd murmurs, torches flare, and you feel an odd calm. The serpent has carried you safely through its coils, out the other side. You sit back, breath steady, realizing the symbolism. Life winds inward, chaotic and uncertain. But if you play well, if luck and fate align, you emerge renewed. The board fades, leaving only the memory of the serpent's spiral curling in your mind. And as you sit in the deepening night, stars overhead, you understand why the Egyptians played men. It wasn't just a game. It was a rehearsal for the eternal cycle. A reminder that even when swallowed by darkness, the light might yet find its way out again. The serpent coils slip away, leaving you in darkness. But then you hear a different sound, a faint clatter, irregular and sharp, like teeth knocking together. You glance down and realize your hands are full of small knuckle bones, smooth and polished, ready to be tossed. Ancient Egyptians didn't just play with boards. They loved games of pure chance, too. No carved serpent, no painted grid, just bones, sticks, and the invisible hand of fate. The mainstream fact: Egyptians used casting sticks or knuckle bones, called astragali, as randomizing tools, much like dice. Unlike our neat cubes with numbered dots, these bones had uneven sides, and the way they landed determined your move. Some sticks had painted sides to show different outcomes. Historians still argue whether players treated these objects as tools of random fun, or if they saw the results as literal messages from the gods. Here's the quirky tidbit. In some tombs, archaeologists found gaming sticks decorated with hieroglyphs, each side representing concepts like life, chaos, or victory. Imagine rolling and landing on chaos twice in a row. Did that mean you were unlucky in the game, or doomed in real life? Talk about raising the stakes. And if you think superstition around dice is silly, remember, even today, gamblers blow on dice for luck, as if air moisture improves math. You crouch on the temple steps, a crowd forming around you. A boy tosses a set of knuckle bones high into the air, catching them on the back of his hand. He grins proudly as they clatter down, and the others groan. They've seen this trick before, and he always wins. It feels like the world's first street hustle. Someone mutters, "He must be blessed by Bess," and others nod, whether trick or talent. Everyone believes something bigger is at play. You try your hand at the sticks. They scatter on the stone, some showing light-painted sides, others plain. The group leans in, breath held. You count quickly, 3 painted up, 1 down. Cheers erupt, half in celebration, half in mock complaint. A woman smirks and says, "The gods like you today." You know she means it as both a joke and a warning. Historians still puzzle over whether casting sticks in Egypt were strictly part of board games or sometimes used alone, like proto-dice games. Some even suggest they doubled as divination tools, tiny oracles tossed on temple floors. Think of it as both game night and cosmic consultation. Egyptians didn't really separate the two. For them, chance was never meaningless. It was a glimpse into the divine pattern. And here's where the humor creeps in. Imagine an ancient Egyptian teen telling their parents, "No, I'm not gambling. I'm consulting the gods." That line has probably been recycled for 3,000 years in various forms. You look again at the sticks in your hand. They're simple, almost crude, slivers of wood, unevenly shaped. But the weight of belief makes them feel alive. Each toss carries suspense. Will you advance or stumble? Will fortune smile or will chaos laugh? In their randomness, you feel the whole human condition. We crave control, but so much depends on chance. As the night deepens, the crowd drifts off, leaving only you, the sticks, and the sound of distant music, flutes and drums echoing across an aisle. You sit alone, tossing, catching, rolling, and realize how hypnotic it is. A game of chance becomes meditation. Each fall of bone a reminder of uncertainty. And strangely, it comforts you. Because whether on a palace floor, a villager's dirt courtyard, or here on a temple step, the rattle of dice-like bones always brought laughter, tension, and a fleeting sense of pattern. In that sound, you hear eternity disguised as play. The sound of the bones fades, replaced by silence thick as stone. You blink and realize you've stepped into the cool darkness of a tomb. The air is dry, almost brittle, and carries that faint mineral tang of limestone. Torchlight flickers across painted walls. Scenes of boats sailing the underworld, gods with animal heads judging souls, and, oddly comforting, men and women bent over familiar boards. Here, in the hush of eternity, board games wait like companions. The mainstream fact: archaeologists have uncovered countless Senet boards, mem boards, and other gaming sets sealed inside tombs, some of them gilded, inlaid with ivory, and designed to last forever. Tutankhamun's tomb alone yielded several elaborate boards, alongside his chariots, daggers, and jars of wine. Historians still argue whether these were symbolic gifts meant to secure passage through the afterlife, or whether pharaohs genuinely planned to keep playing once they crossed over. Either way, the message is clear. Death did not end the game. Quirky tidbit: some tomb boards were deliberately unfinished, half-carved grids, pawns missing, suggesting they were activated only in the afterlife. Imagine being buried with an eternal board game starter pack, the rest downloadable only once you log into eternity. The ancient version of a free trial, really. You run your fingers along a golden Senet board, propped neatly in its case. The pieces glint in the torchlight, ivory pawns shaped like little towers. You imagine Tutankhamun himself lifting one, moving it carefully across the board, rehearsing his soul's journey long before his death at 19. Did he ever imagine modern tourists, cameras flashing, staring at his eternal game shelf? Probably not. Deeper into the chamber, you spot something stranger, a mem board shaped like a coiled serpent resting beside a mummy. The serpent's body gleams faintly in the light, its spiral perfect, eternal. Lion-shaped figurines lie beside it, guardians awaiting their cue. You realize that for the Egyptians, these weren't games in our modern sense. They were maps, guides, tools for navigating the great unknown. To them, leaving the dead without a game was like sending a traveler into the desert without water. You kneel and listen. The tomb is quiet, but your imagination fills in whispers. Priests chanting over the burial, reminding the deceased that the board will help them cross the treacherous waters of the Duat. Family members weeping softly, perhaps comforted by the thought that their loved one won't be alone. They'll have dice to rattle, pawns to move, strategies to ponder as eternity stretches out. Historians still debate how literally the Egyptians believed in this. Was the game a symbolic reminder of order and renewal, or did they truly expect to sit down with Osiris himself for a casual match? Nobody knows. But looking at these boards, sealed away for thousands of years, you feel the conviction. They weren't hedging bets, they were serious. You let out a soft laugh. Imagine if modern people were buried with their favorite distractions. Archaeologists in 5,000 years might dig up coffins stuffed with PlayStations, half-charged phones, and Monopoly sets with missing money. They'd probably draw the same conclusions. Humans hate being bored, even in eternity. The torch sputters, shadows stretching long. You notice scratched graffiti on one tomb wall, a grid barely visible, likely carved by a workman during construction. Even here in the solemnity of burial, someone paused to carve a game for themselves. It's a reminder that no matter how serious death was, the living still found ways to laugh, to pass the time, to scribble joy onto stone. The quiet wraps around you like a blanket. You picture yourself lying in that sarcophagus, eyes closed, a game board resting beside you. Would you feel comforted? Would you wake in another world, roll the sticks, and begin again? The thought is strangely soothing. Death, seen this way, becomes less final, more like the next round in an endless game. The torch burns lower. You breathe slower. The golden boards gleam faintly as if waiting. And in that silence, you understand. For the Egyptians, eternity wasn't terrifying. It was simply another move, another turn, another chance to play. The tomb shadows dissolve, and you step into a sunlit courtyard. This time, the players gathered around the board aren't just farmers or pharaohs. They are women in fine linen, their eyes lined with kohl, jewelry catching the light. Priestesses and queens lean forward with the same intent as any warrior or king, their fingers poised above carved pawns. The clatter of sticks and the hum of conversation remind you that these games belong to everyone, not just men who wore crowns. The mainstream fact: tomb paintings, including those of Queen Nefertari, depict women playing Senet. Evidence suggests women of high rank engage with these games both socially and ritually. Historians still argue whether their participation carried special symbolic weight, perhaps tied to fertility rites or goddess worship, or whether they simply enjoyed the challenge like anyone else. Either way, women weren't excluded. The boards belonged to all. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some smaller Senet boards were designed to be portable, folded like boxes with little drawers for pieces. Scholars believe elite women may have carried them to social gatherings, almost like showing up to brunch with your favorite card deck. Oh, you brought bread and figs? Great. I brought destiny. You watch as two women sit across from one another, their laughter carrying across the courtyard. One moves her pawn boldly, sliding it past a risky square. Her rival raises an eyebrow and mutters a prayer to Hathor, goddess of joy and love, as if to balance the odds. The onlookers clap softly, clearly invested in the outcome. It's less about victory, more about charm, wit, and showing the gods you're unafraid of fate. Historians still debate whether priestesses used Senet as part of formal temple rituals, invoking deities as the pawns moved across squares. Some researchers point to boards found in sanctuaries, arguing they symbolize eternal dance between order and chaos. Others counter that women simply had leisure time and enjoyed playing. Maybe both are true, because you can see it on their faces. The sacred and the playful are mingled. You chuckle at the scene. Picture an Egyptian noblewoman, perfectly dressed, balancing a delicate lotus blossom in one hand, while glaring down at her opponent across the Senet board. It's the ancient version of don't underestimate me just because I look fabulous. And honestly, she's probably better at strategy than most generals. The game continues. A priestess rolls the sticks and moves her piece, landing directly on her rival's pawn. Gasps rise from the crowd. She gently removes a pawn from a board, sliding aside with serene smile. The other woman narrows her eyes, mock offended, and everyone bursts into laughter. You can't help but grin. The tension, the teasing, the quick wit. It's universal, recognizable across thousands of years. And then the tone shifts. The women pause, bow their heads, and murmur a short prayer. The courtyard grows still, the game momentarily transformed into something solemn. You realize again how fluid these games were. One moment a playful contest, the next a ritual gesture toward eternity. The sun grows warmer, shadows stretching. Children run by, giggling, chasing one another with reed dolls. One pauses to watch the women play, eyes wide, absorbing every move. It feels like a lesson. Games aren't only for passing time. They're for teaching courage, patience, and reverence for forces unseen. A soft breeze passes, lifting the scent of frankincense from a nearby brazier. The women lean back, exchanging smiles, and you sense a deep bond between them. This isn't just competition, it's communion, a way of sharing time, laughter, and destiny. You imagine Nefertari herself, painted in her tomb, still poised eternally over her Senet board. Was she preparing for the afterlife? Or was she simply immortalizing the joy of a good game? Historians may never settle the debate, but standing here, you feel the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that she played fully, with laughter and reverence, just like these women before you. And suddenly you feel lighter. These queens and priestesses remind you that games aren't distractions from life. They're reflections of it. Even in moments of great responsibility, there's room to roll the sticks, move the pieces, and laugh at fate. The courtyard laughter drifts away, and you find yourself standing on a dusty trade road. The horizon stretches wide, and along it comes a caravan. Donkeys laden with baskets, Nubian traders singing as they walk, Mesopotamian merchants trailing carts filled with clay jars and fabrics. The air smells of spice, sweat, and the faint tang of copper. You notice one of the traders has a small wooden board strapped to his pack, edges carved with unfamiliar symbols. Egypt didn't invent every game it loved. Some came wandering in with the merchants. The mainstream fact: Egypt's board game culture was not sealed in isolation. Evidence shows cross-cultural influence, with games like the royal game of from Mesopotamia possibly inspiring or blending with Egyptian practices. Nubia to the south also had its own board games, which may have traveled north along trade routes. Historians still argue whether Egyptian games shaped foreign ones, or vice versa, who borrowed from whom. The truth is probably a messy back and forth, like all culture exchanges. Quirky tidbit: archaeologists discovered fragments of foreign game boards in Egyptian sites, sometimes side by side with Senet. Imagine an Egyptian noble bragging, "I got the new Mesopotamian model imported last week." The ancient version of flexing the latest gadget. You kneel near the caravan as traders gather for rest. Someone lays down a board that looks like Senet but isn't. Its squares arranged differently, symbols unfamiliar. The Egyptians among them lean close. Curious. One tries his hand, fumbling with the rules, laughing when he inevitably loses. His Nubian opponent grins, clearly used to schooling beginners. You realize this is how games spread. Not by decree, but by curiosity, laughter, and late-night competitions under starlight. Historians still debate whether Egyptian Senet directly influenced the royal game of or both descended from a much older shared ancestor. The boards look similar but not identical, and the rules are shrouded in mystery. What's clear is that human hands move tokens across grids on both sides of the desert, guided by sticks, bones, or dice. You smile at the scene. Picture an Egyptian and a Mesopotamian trying to explain rules to one another, each insisting theirs is the right way. It's the same argument friends have today when someone insists monopoly money goes into free parking. Some debates truly transcend borders. The sun sets, and the group lights a small fire. Around it, they play. Egyptians teaching Senet, foreigners teaching their own games. Words blend, gestures fill the gaps, and laughter bridges the rest. You feel the warmth of that universality. No matter what language you speak, you can understand the joy of moving a piece, taking a chance, winning, or losing. And of course, rivalry emerges. A young Egyptian man leans in too close, determined not to lose again. His opponent smirks, rolls the dice, and captures his piece with a flourish. The Egyptians groan, the foreigners cheer, and wages of bread or beer are tossed into the pot. It feels timeless, globalization by way of board games. Quirky thought: if Egypt absorbed foreign games as casually as this, maybe tombs filled with eternal entertainment were also stocked with imports. Imagine Osiris blinking at the Afterlife's customs office. "Another box of UR? We've got plenty, thanks." The fire crackles lower, and the traders drift into sleep. Boards are tucked away, pieces stored carefully in pouches. You remain awake, watching stars roll overhead, and realize the truth. Games spread like stories, slipping through borders, carried in pockets and memories. They don't belong to one culture. They belong to everyone who plays. And so, as the desert quiets, you see the faint outline of another caravan approaching. More games, more laughter, more exchanges. Egypt's love of play was never stagnant. It was a living current, forever reshaped by the world flowing through it. The caravan fades into the night, and you open your eyes inside a temple. Columns tower above you, painted with lotus blooms and stars, their surfaces glowing in torchlight. The air feels heavy, not with dust this time, but with incense so thick it almost tastes sweet on your tongue. Around you, priests in white linen move deliberately, their shaved heads shining with oil, and there on a low stone altar lies not bread or beer, but a Senet board. The mainstream fact. Some scholars believe Egyptian games were occasionally tied to temple rituals. Senet boards have been found in sacred spaces, and hieroglyphic inscriptions link gameplay to divine order. Historians still argue whether these rituals were public or private, symbolic or literal. Did priests roll sticks to reenact the soul's journey? Or was it purely theatrical, a way of teaching cosmic truths to onlookers? Quirky tidbit. Certain squares on some Senet boards carry religious titles. House of Rebirth, House of Waters, House of the Three Truths. Imagine priests solemnly moving pawns while chanting hymns, each square reflecting a cosmic stage. It's half chess match, half liturgy. If you've ever seen a poker face, picture that. Except instead of money, the stakes of the universe's balance. You crouch low, watching. A priest lifts the casting sticks high, chanting softly to Thoth, God of wisdom. He tosses them onto the board. The clatter echoes off temple walls like tiny thunderclaps. Gasps ripple through the gathered worshippers. The priest calmly moves his piece forward, past a painted square. To you, it looks like a simple roll. To them, it's a sign. The gods have spoken. Historians still debate whether the outcome of these ritual games influenced decisions. Did a bad roll mean a ceremony needed repeating? Did a pawn landing in the House of Waters foreshadow a poor Nile flood? Nobody knows for certain. But the intensity on those priestly faces tells you chance was never trivial. And yet, you smirk. It's easy to imagine a priest sneaking a grin, inwardly pleased at a good roll. Humans can't help it. Even when cloaked in ritual, the thrill of luck is irresistible. If one priest beat another, did he later boast quietly while pouring beer in the temple quarters? The gods favor me today. The crowd sways in rhythm with the chants. You watch pawns creep across squares, each movement accompanied by invocations. The room pulses like a living board itself. Players as pawns, chants as dice, temple as grid. You feel yourself slipping into the rhythm, lulled by incense drum beats and the clatter of sticks. One priest kneels, whispering, May this soul cross safely. Another answers, May chaos be left behind. The words fall heavy, echoing deeper than the stone chamber. You suddenly realize this isn't pretend. They believe the board mediates between worlds. Each move isn't about winning. It's about aligning human life with cosmic order. You glance at the worshippers, their eyes wide, watching as if life itself depended on the outcome. Maybe it did. For them, disorder, Isfet, was always looming, ready to unravel society. A single bad omen mattered. A single game might tell them if Maat, the goddess of truth, was still balanced. And yet, amid the solemnity, a thought sneaks in. Imagine a bored temple apprentice, yawning during the ritual, whispering to his friend, If the gods can control dice, why don't they ever let me win? Even in the most sacred settings, a touch of sarcasm must have survived. The ritual concludes. The final pawn slides into the last square, and the priests bow their heads. A gong sounds, echoing like thunder through the temple. The crowd exhales, tension broken, and incense smoke swirls upward like souls ascending. You sit back, strangely calmed, realizing you've just watched history's strangest blend of gaming and religion. And then you wonder, were they rehearsing death or simply dramatizing what everyone already knew, that life itself is a game of chance, best played with reverence? The answer slips through your fingers, like incense through air. The temple incense drifts away, thinning into the open air, and you find yourself in a lively courtyard again. This time the players are much smaller. Children crouch low to the ground, their linen tunics rumpled, their laughter shrill and unrestrained. Instead of fine ivory pawns or gilded boards, they've drawn crooked squares into the dust with sticks. Their pieces? Pebbles, broken pottery shards. Even the occasional beetle nudged reluctantly across the lines. The mainstream fact. Archaeological digs in worker villages like Deir el-Medina reveal scratched grids that appear child-sized, shallow, and uneven, suggesting games weren't only the realm of adults. Children likely use simplified versions of Senet or men, learning both rules and life lessons. Historians still argue whether children were deliberately taught cosmic symbolism through play, or whether they simply copied adults without understanding. Quirky tidbit. Some small pawns carved from cheap faience appear too clumsy for adult use, leading scholars to wonder if they were starter sets for kids. Imagine the ancient version of a Fisher-Price Senet board. Bright colors optional, but eternal destiny still included. You kneel beside the children, watching them bicker with the same intensity as pharaohs. A little boy insists his pebble jump 2 squares. His sister rolls her eyes and flicks his hand away. Another child, barely 5, insists her beetle is the fastest piece alive. You grin. It's ridiculous, but you recognize the universal rhythm of childhood. Rules bent, imagination boundless. One older child, perhaps 12, takes the game seriously. He smooths the dust squares carefully, lines his pawn straight, and whispers a prayer before moving. You realize he's mimicking what he's seen priests or parents do. To him, this isn't just play, it's rehearsal. He's learning the dance of chance, the patience of waiting for sticks to fall, the humility of losing gracefully, or at least trying to. He scowls when his sister knocks him back to the start. Historians still debate whether this playful training was intentional. Did parents encourage kids to play because they believed it prepared them for life and death? Or did kids simply invent games out of boredom, and the adults retroactively claim meaning? Either way, the result is the same. Children grew into adults who already knew the rhythm of the squares. You can't help but laugh softly at the sight. One boy, clearly the comedian of the group, pretends his pawn piece is a soldier marching into enemy territory. He gives a squeaky voice, "I shall conquer chaos," before dropping it dramatically into wrong square. Everyone erupts in giggles, rolling on the ground. It's Egypt's earliest improv comedy troupe, right in the dust. And yet, amid the laughter, you notice something deeper. These games teach turn-taking, patience, calculation, and above all, acceptance of chance. In a society where the Nile's floods decided survival, what better lesson than learning how to live with unpredictability? Every pebble moved, every stick rolled, whispered the same truth. You can't control everything, but you can learn to play within it. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching. Parents call children inside, voices rising above the laughter. One girl clutches her pebble like treasure, refusing to leave it behind. She tucks it into her tunic, certain it carries luck. You smile. It's the same impulse that makes kids today refuse to part with a favorite toy. Objects become talismans, symbols of victories big and small. The dust boards are left behind, half-finished games frozen mid-play. You glance back as the courtyard empties, and for a moment you swear you see ghostly pawns still moving, children's laughter echoing faintly. These games, you realize, were never trivial. They were rehearsals for adulthood, for responsibility, for the mysteries that would one day demand solemn prayers. But for now, for them, it was joy. Pure, unfiltered, reckless joy. And that joy lingers in the air long after the children scatter, as if reminding you, even in a culture obsessed with eternity, laughter had its rightful place. The dust-scratched grids fade beneath the children's laughter, and suddenly you are seated on a cool stone bench in a shaded garden. Date palms sway overhead, water trickles lazily from a carved basin, and 2 scholars lean close in debate. They're not moving pawns, but they're staring at a painted Senet board as if it hides secrets only time can untangle. Their voices rise and fall like the breeze, alternating between passion and puzzlement. The mainstream fact: modern scholars have pored over surviving Senet boards for more than a century, but the original rules remain lost. Reconstructions vary wildly, some resembling race games like backgammon, others leaning toward symbolic journeys. Historians still argue whether Senet was primarily a fun pastime that later absorbed spiritual meaning, or whether it was designed from the start as a map of the afterlife. The lack of a written rule book leaves everyone guessing. Here's the quirky tidbit. A handful of experimental archaeologists have actually tried playtesting Senet using different rule sets. Some insisted on strict dice-like rolls. Others used weighted probabilities with sticks. The results? Games that range from thrillingly strategic to mind-numbingly boring. One scholar even joked, if this is what Egyptians played for eternity, no wonder they buried themselves with beer. You lean closer, listening to the debate. One scholar gestures at a square painted with water ripples. This is the House of Waters, he insists. Clearly it represents chaos, where the soul risks drowning. His colleague snorts, rolling her eyes. Or maybe it's just a penalty square, like losing a turn. Not everything is cosmic, you know? The tension is almost comical, like two modern friends arguing over whether Uno's reverse card is symbolic of reincarnation. Historians still puzzle over why some Senet boards have decorated squares while others are plain. Was decoration reserved for sacred sets? Or did players simply enjoy fancier boards, the way we prefer custom Monopoly editions today? The debate lingers unresolved, and the scholars around you keep circling back, each convinced their theory holds weight. You smirk, imagining ancient Egyptians overhearing this. They'd probably laugh, slap the board down, and say, "The rules are simple, watch us play." Yet here you are, centuries later, overthinking squares on a grid. But maybe that's the beauty. The uncertainty keeps the mystery alive. The scholars pause, sipping watered wine, eyes softening. One admits, perhaps the truth is lost forever. The other smiles faintly. Or perhaps it was never written. It was meant to be felt. Their words hang in the air, a reminder that not everything can be reduced to neat instructions. Some truths live in experience, not manuals. You lean back, close your eyes for a moment. You recall the villagers laughing in dust, the pharaohs frowning in concentration, the priestesses whispering prayers. Each played the same game, but each saw something different. Entertainment, ritual, training, destiny. Maybe Senet was all of these things at once. Maybe that's why scholars argue, because they're trying to separate what was never meant to be separated. A modern thought drifts in, and you chuckle. Imagine historians in the future trying to reconstruct the rules of Monopoly from a single half-burnt board. Clearly the little top hat piece signifies status in society, and the jail square represents cosmic punishment. And somewhere a ghostly child screams, "No, we just fought about free parking." The garden quiets. The scholars gather their scrolls and drift away, still muttering. You're left with a painted board glinting in the sun. Its squares stare back at you, mysterious, timeless. The silence feels heavy, but not frustrating. It feels like an invitation. You realize you don't need perfect rules to play. You just need to roll, to move, to engage. And perhaps that was the Egyptian secret all along. Life is meant to be lived, not solved. The garden fades into twilight, and when you open your eyes again, you're watching centuries blur together. The Nile keeps flooding and receding. Dynasties rise and fall, and yet the boards remain. Egyptians pass them on to Greeks, to Romans, to anyone who lingers long enough on the banks of the river. The hum of dice sticks, and laughter doesn't stop. It just changes shape. The mainstream fact: board games didn't die with Egypt's old kingdom. Variant of Senet and Men survived into later cultures, morphing into Roman ludus duodecim scriptum or even African Mancala-like games. Historians still argue how direct the influence was, or whether these later games were independent inventions. But echoes of Egyptian patterns show up again and again across the ancient world. Quirky tidbit. In some Roman villas, archaeologists discovered grids scratched into marble steps suspiciously similar to Senet layouts. Apparently, even toga-clad senators couldn't resist killing time with a round before debating politics. It's the ancient version of scrolling your phone outside a meeting. You watch the torchlight shift, and suddenly the scene changes. A Roman soldier sits at a tavern table, rolling dice across a board. The rules are different, but the rhythm feels familiar. Slide a piece. Take a chance. Hope luck holds. Across the Mediterranean, in a Nubian household, children push shells into tiny hollows carved into wood, a game that looks a lot like Mancala. Laughter spills through the house, echoing the same joy you saw in Egyptian courtyards. Historians still argue whether Senet directly inspired these, or whether humans simply love grids and tokens too much to stop inventing them. Either way, the DNA of Egyptian gaming lingers. You see it in African seed games, in European race games, even in the role of modern dice. Egypt might have passed the baton quietly, but the relay never ended. You chuckle at the thought. Imagine an ancient Egyptian soul peeking at a modern Monopoly board. Wait, so you pass go, you collect money, and you, what? Buy houses? Where's the House of Waters? Where's the Feather of Maat? The cultural shift is hilarious, and yet the core remains the same, a ritual of luck, strategy, and surviving the chaos of chance. The centuries swirl faster. In medieval Europe, pilgrims carried tiny boards in their satchels. In West Africa, elders sit beneath baobab trees, playing games with seeds that echo the eternal cycle of life and death. In Asia, games like Go and Xiangqi flourish, parallel yet connected by that same human itch to structure uncertainty into grids. You feel the web of play expanding, linking continents, all rooted in the same desire to tame fate with tokens. The quirky irony? Some of the very same scholars who dismiss Senet as just a pastime spend years obsessively reconstructing its rules. We've turned the ancient game into our own puzzle, an afterlife of scholarship. The Egyptians may be laughing at us from beyond. Still playing, are you? The night deepens. You hear dice clatter in Roman villas, shells scrape in African Mancala pits, sticks rattle in dusty Egyptian streets. All at once. The sounds overlap until they blur into a heartbeat, steady and eternal. Play is the constant, no matter the era, no matter the empire. You lean back, breathing slower. You understand now, Egypt didn't just invent games. It gave humanity a template for resilience. To face death, boredom, uncertainty, or cosmic chaos, you play. You make rules, bend them, laugh at them, argue over them. And in doing so, you remember you're alive. The torchlight flickers, then fades, leaving only the ripple of the Nile under starlight. And as the river flows, carrying seeds, stones, and stories downstream, you realize the games flowed too, passing to millennia, reshaping, but never vanishing. The river of centuries slows, the echoes dim, and you find yourself once more beneath Egypt's stars. The boards, the pawns, the serpent coils, all fade into quiet sand. You sit with it all, the laughter of villagers, the stern gaze of priests, the grins of queens, the groans of children who lost their pebbles in the dust. The story has wound its way like Mehen's serpent, tail meeting head, and here you are at the end of the spiral. The mainstream fact, Egyptian board games were more than amusement. They were bound to religion, daily life, and even eternity itself, with countless examples buried in tombs as essential afterlife provisions. Historians still argue how literal these beliefs were, whether the dead truly expect to keep playing or if the games were symbols only. Either way, their importance is unquestionable. And the quirky tidbit? A few game boards were found with pawns glued in place as though mid-match. Some suggest to symbolize an eternal pause button, so the deceased could pick up right where they left off. Imagine entering the afterlife, shaking hands with Osiris, then saying, "Sorry, gotta finish this round first." The desert wind sighs. You gaze across the silent sands and realize the lesson was never about winning. It was about preparing, practicing, laughing, daring. The Egyptians face eternity not with fear, but with games in hand. And you, just listening, just imagining, have played alongside them. The pace slows now. The stars overhead blur softly, their edges melting into streaks of silver. The sand cools under your palms, grain slipping gently through your fingers like the last counters sliding off a board. Your breath deepens, and even the faint hum of the night feels like it's rocking you into calm. You picture the serpent of men again, not threatening but protective, its body curling around you like a guardian. Each scale shimmers faintly in moonlight, each coil a reminder that life itself winds inward, then outward endlessly. In this safe spiral, there is no rush, no urgency, only the steady rhythm of chance and choice, turn after turn, all leading you gently forward. The laughter of children returns faintly, softer this time, carried on the wind like echoes from another world. You let the sound wash over you, knowing it belongs both to the past and to the present, a timeless lullaby disguised as play. The pawns move slowly in your imagination, one square at a time. No hurry. They're not racing anymore. They're gliding, drifting, like your own thoughts as they loosen and soften. Even the gods, stern as they seem in painted tombs, now smile faintly in your mind. Osiris doesn't weigh your heart tonight. Instead, He leans back, waiting patiently for your turn. There's no losing here, no cosmic penalty. Just the comfort of knowing the game continues. Gently, peacefully, forever. Your body feels heavier, more relaxed. The desert coolness settles into your bones like a blanket. You let the images fade, ivory pawns, serpent boards, torchlight chants, and allow only the calm to remain. You've traveled far, through laughter and ritual, through dust and gold, and now the journey folds inward into quiet. Let the coils close. Let the dice fall where they may. You've already played well. And in the hush of this ancient night, with sand beneath you and stars above, you can finally let go.